So welcome everyone, and thank you so much for that magnificent music. I'm going to sing like that in heaven, and I'm going to play like that in heaven. But until then, I'll listen and very much appreciate. So thank you so much for that. Tonight, as promised, I'm going to take you on a journey. I'm going to take you on a journey through your gastrointestinal tract. It's a very interesting journey, and it's a very misunderstood journey. We've been looking at the life of the flesh that's in the blood, and the blood is the carrier of nutrients. And we can be putting the best nutrients into our bodies, but if our digestion is not working well, if it's not able to break those substances down to tiny molecules so they can be absorbed out of the gut and into the blood, then we will suffer and our blood will not have the nutrients we need. Yes, we need the best food. Yes, we need organic food as much as possible. Yes, we need to be eating it in the right way, leaving a break between the meals, and I'll be showing you why as we go through our journey. But how important it is that our digestion be breaking down those substances, because our gastrointestine is a hollow tube, and anything that goes in there is not part of us till it gets broken down to tiny substances, absorbed out of the gut, into the blood, then it becomes part of you and me. As we begin, I'd like to invite the greatest teacher this world has ever known to teach us this evening. Father, thank you so much for our gastrointestinal tract. And now Father, we wait for you to teach us. Give us understanding as we study this amazing body. We pray in the mighty name of Jesus. Amen. So we begin with the mouth. And Proverbs 14 verse 6 says, "Knowledge is easy to him that understands." My aim is to give you an understanding of how the gastrointestinal tract works, and then you have the knowledge on how to treat it. It's about 10 yards long. It's a very long journey, but I should be able to cover it in an hour. And we begin at the mouth. And the mouth is the only part of the whole of our gastrointestinal tract that we have say over. We have 5 choices. And these 5 choices affect the whole of the gastrointestinal tract. We have say over what goes in. Is it fast, devitalized food, or is it organic, grown in the best way, prepared in the best manner? We have say over what goes in. Number 2, we have say over how much goes in. Is it 10 platefuls of food, or is it just one reasonable plate of food? And what often depends on the next one, we have say over how long it's in the mouth. Is it chew, chew, swallow, or is it put knife and fork down and chew, chew, chew? Because there are no teeth in our stomach. The only place we can chew is in the mouth. Have you heard the old saying, we should drink our food and we should chew our... Start again. We should drink our food and chew our drinks. So when our guests come to our retreat, we give them a fresh vegetable and fruit juice every 2 hours on the first 2 days. And we encourage them to take a mouthful and chew, chew, chew. In fact, swish it in the mouth a little bit, then swallow it. Not drink, 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 drink. And with food, we should chew it until it's a cream. So we have say over what goes in, we have say over how much goes in, we have say over how long it's in our mouth, and we say how often it goes in. Is it every hour? Is it every 2 hours? Or is it breakfast like a king, lunch like a queen, and supper like a pauper? One lady said, "What do paupers eat?" I said, "Sometimes nothing." And the 5th choice is we have say over the environment of entry. As one writer said, we should cast off care and anxious thought when we sit to dine. No controversial issues are to be discussed at the table. In fact, if ever I had a child who was crying or upset, You can't digest when you've got a crying child at the table, can you? So they're the 5 choices that we have in the mouth. And in the mouth, it's an alkaline environment. And most people don't realise that digestion begins in the mouth. And one digestion is salivary amylase. Salivary amylase is ptyalin. And ptyalin is a salivary amylase that breaks down starch. Starch digestion begins in the mouth. What's starch? Another name for starch is carbohydrates. So it's basically all your grains, basically. So this is pastas and breads and cereals. And also legumes, they have a little bit of starch in them. So we should chew, chew, chew. Because when we get down into the stomach, it's an acid environment. And so when we get down into the stomach, it probably takes about 15 minutes before the acid infiltrates and then the ptyalin can't break down the starch anymore. So please chew, 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 chew very well. There's another food that's broken down in the stomach, in the mouth, and that is saturated fat. What's saturated fat? Saturated fat is coconut, saturated fat is palm oil, saturated fat is butter, and there are some nuts like a macadamia nut, they're fairly high in saturated fats. And as we looked at in our last lecture on the heart, it is a total myth, it's a total lie, it's a total misconception that saturated fat causes heart disease. You see, coconut oil has stood the test of time, and there was no heart attacks happening in the South Pacific Islands when Captain Cook landed. In fact, he was confronted with the most magnificent specimens of humanity he'd ever seen. They were strong, fit, healthy. And they had coconut every meal. No, coconut stood the test of time. It's a myth that saturated fat causes heart disease. Saturated fat is actually a unique fat because the breakdown begins in the mouth under lingual lipase. Lingual lipase is the enzyme released from the sublingual glands under the tongue. And lingual lipase is the enzyme that breaks down saturated fat. Back to ptyalin for a minute. Ptyalin is not very much in the mouth in a baby because they don't need it, because they're having milk. And it's not until the molars are through, these are the big teeth at the back here, it's not until they're through that ptyalin is released in larger amounts. Do you know what that means? No baby should have bread or cereal or pasta until the molars are through. When do the molars come through? Anywhere between 14 and 22 months of age. Now, I gave you a verse this morning and this afternoon. It's Psalm 146, verse 3, where the Bible says, "Put not your trust in princes," princes being the authorities in the field. What do the authorities in nutrition tell young mothers? Between 4 and 6 months of age, you must give your baby rice cereal. Did you know that? I'm sure the mothers are nodding, yeah. But there's no ptyalin in the mouth to break down the starch until the molars are through. And the molars aren't through well into the 2nd year of life. So why? Well, the princes have studied breast milk. And the princes say there's not enough breast milk in the second 6 months compared to the first 6 months. So we must supplement. Has God made a mistake? Does God make mistakes? God never makes mistakes. So why has breast milk got less iron in it in the second 6 months compared to the first 6 months? Have you seen how much a baby grows in the first 6 months? They literally explode. But in the second 6 months, it slows down a little bit. And it's not rocket science to know or to determine that the baby's need for iron in the first 6 months is far greater than in the second 6 months. So if the authorities tell you, oh, your baby must have cereal, Now that your baby's 6 months, there's not enough iron in the breast milk. You know what you say? Thank you so much for your opinion. Got that? Because that's what it is. It's an opinion, and actually it's wrong. Don't go to bat with them. Don't dialogue with them. Just say thank you so much for your advice, and you go home and you do. You do what your gut feeling tells you. My son James, he was not interested in food till he was 16 months of age. Not at all. So he didn't eat any food till he was 16 months of age. He wasn't interested. And yet he was well padded. All his milestones were kept. Lots of wet nappies. Isn't that the sign? That's the sign. None of my babies saw a paediatrician. And they all lived. Got that? None of my babies saw a doctor. There's no need. One lady said, my paediatrician said he won't see me anymore unless I give the baby shots. I said, good. Yeah, that's good. You don't need a paediatrician. We have got the greatest doctor this world has ever known to be our guide. And that is the great God of heaven. And he said in Psalm 32 verse 8, I will instruct thee and teach thee in the way that thou shalt go. I will guide thee with mine eye. And just that I've been teaching you to listen to your bodies, mother, listen to your babies. If your baby's got lots of wet nappies, your baby's happy, your baby's meeting the milestones, your baby is perfectly fine. Size isn't a good guide. Some babies are small, some babies are big. But a happy baby's important. So please, tell every mother you know this piece of information. The first teeth are 4 at the top, 4 at the bottom. You know what they're called? Milk teeth. You know why they're called milk teeth? Because that's all babies should have is milk. Now when they can sit, when they can feed themselves, maybe then you give them a piece of cucumber to suck on, maybe a bit of celery to suck on. It's taste time, that's all, but they really do not need much to speak of until those molars come through. Because it's not until the molars are through that the glands in the mouth relieve ptyalin, the salivary amylase. In my book, Sustain Me, there's a chapter or a section called What Shall I Feed My Baby? You have my permission to take photographs of those chapters and give it to every mother you know. Because unfortunately, we've got a lot of gut problems today because babies are fed food too young. And we are what we are today because of everything that ever happened in our life. Now, I've got some good news. If you've done everything wrong, we have a very forgiving body, and once you start doing everything right, it will respond. So now we swallow. What an amazing process is the swallow. When we swallow, it closes our trachea and opens our esophagus, and the food comes down. It's a muscular contraction, and the contraction continues down our esophagus, and then, because it's contracting, that little valve at the top of our stomach, called the cardiac sphincter, it contracts and opens, and the food comes through that little cardiac sphincter and into the stomach. Now, there's a condition today called GERDs or reflux or heartburn, and I have to tell you a funny story. Jack and I were in Little Rock Airport last year, and we came into the wrong area. There was no one around, and I saw a policeman with a very big gun. And you never see that in Australia. Very big gun. And I went up and I said, "Excuse me, can you help us? I think we're in the wrong place." And he smiled, nodded, shut his offer, picked up his gun and said, "I'll show you." And we're at the lift and he says, "You're Barbara O'Neill, aren't you?" I said, "Yes." He said, "Well, I was on Nexium and the like for 10 years because I had reflux. I watched your lecture. You said it's a scam. I stopped it immediately. I started to have breakfast like a king, lunch like a queen. I started to take cayenne pepper to boost my hydrochloric acid." He said, "I don't have reflux anymore." He said, "Thank you. Come this way." It's a scam. Another one. "Put not your trust in princes, neither in the Son of Man in whom there is no help." You might actually go for an opinion, but you know, that's what it is. It's an opinion. So notice that this cardiac sphincter sits in the middle of your diaphragm, and your diaphragm is part of your abdominal muscles. And if your abdominal muscles are not strong, your cardiac sphincter will not be strong. We've been talking about strengthening the core muscles to help your back because they're all connected. Now we're talking about strengthening your abdominal muscles to strengthen your little cardiac sphincter. Most people develop reflux because they have breakfast like a pauper, lunch like a pauper, and supper is the king and the queen together. Then they lay down and gravity presses against that cardiac sphincter, weakening it. So we come now into the stomach. Lining the stomach are big folds. And these big folds are lined with gastric glands. And 2/3 of these gastric glands release mucus. And that mucus gives it a thick mucosa lining to protect the lining of the stomach from what's released down here. What's released down here is hydrochloric acid, also pepsinogen. And pepsinogen and hydrochloric acid, they unite to release pepsin. And pepsin is the enzyme that breaks down protein. What an amazing God we serve. The pepsin's not released there, or it'll start to break down our stomach lining. The hydrochloric acid's released, and the pepsinogen, they unite to produce pepsin. And pepsin can only work in an acid environment. If someone says to me, I've got a very acid stomach, I said, congratulations, you must be digesting your food very well. Because if you've got good, strong hydrochloric acid, you'll digest your food very, very well. I have never met anyone with too much acid in their stomach. And if I say to someone, how do you know you've got too much acid? Well, it keeps coming up. The problem's not the acid, the problem's the gate. And if you go to the prince, what will he give you? Antacids. That makes no sense at all to me now. That's like shooting the cows because they keep getting into the vegetable garden. Just shut the gate. You don't have to shoot the cows. Just shut the gate. Then you don't have to shoot the acid. How do you shut the gate? It's a muscle. And when it's relaxed, it's closed. And the best muscle relaxant is magnesium. So taking magnesium at night can help to close that muscle. And of course, going to bed with very little in your stomach. If you eat at night, it should be light, and it should be ideally about 4 hours before you actually lay down. So this acid stomach is very important for the release of pepsin. Something else is released here, and that's the intrinsic factor. What's the intrinsic factor? I'm going to now give you the B12 story. This is another very misunderstood story. B12 is bound up in food with the R protein, and we need nice strong hydrochloric acid to release R protein from the B12. And then intrinsic factors released. An intrinsic factor and B12, they float together all the way down the small intestine, and when they get to the last part of the small intestine, they unite, then it's absorbed and it goes into the enterohepatic circulation, keeps going round and round until we need it. Do you know what that means? Someone can have no B12 in their diet for 30 years and not show a deficiency. Most people who are B12 deficient are B12 deficient because they have low hydrochloric acid. And if you've got low hydrochloric acid, you'll also have low intrinsic factor. In my book, Sustain Me, if you didn't catch all that, I've got that written down because I've got a whole section on the stomach. Dr. Neil Nedley, in his book Proof Positive, he shows that you can get B12s from organically grown root vegetables. You can get B12 when you pick an apple off a tree and eat it. It's an airborne bacteria. You can get B12 by picking a few tomatoes out of that greenhouse and eating them. It's an airborne bacteria. As much as possible, I don't wash them. In fact, I was down at the blueberry patch the other day just picking them, and I said to Jack, she's picking them too, I said, are you getting your B12? She said, yeah, getting my B12, because it's an airborne bacteria. Most people that have B12 deficiency, it's because they have low hydrochloric acid and low intrinsic factor. So how can we boost that? Cayenne pepper. I think we've mentioned that before a couple of times, cayenne pepper. You take, well, if you're brave, half a teaspoon. If you're not brave, quarter of a teaspoon of cayenne pepper in a little bit of water just before the meal, and it'll actually stimulate the release of these enzymes. Or you can take the juice of a lemon. That will also help. Or you can take about a quarter of a cup of hot ginger tea. That's a sweet bitter. That will also cause a boost of the release of these digestive enzymes, because it is very important that we have an acid stomach. One thing that really reduces acidity in the stomach is drinking with the meals. We should be drinking between meals, not with meals. You see, digestion is a chemical process, and water dilutes all chemical processes. So please stop drinking half an hour before the meal and resume drinking about an hour and a half after the meal. Also, when we eat all day long, digestion takes, and there's been much research to show this, digestion takes approximately 3.5 to 4 hours. And then the stomach loves a rest of 1 hour. So what does that leave? That leaves approximately 5 to 6 hours between meals. But what about children? Well, when I was in Andalusia, the northern part of southern Spain last year, I stayed with a family that had 4 children, 2-year-old, 4-year-old, 6-year-old, 10-year-old. And those children ate 2 meals a day. Those children ate a meal, I think they had their first meal 8:39, and then they had another meal, I think about 2:30. And they were very well built, they weren't overweight, they weren't skinny, they were muscular, they were fit, they were happy children. And they had 2 meals a day. Do you know what we see so many children eating? Eating all day long. And you see them irritated, and because they're eating all day long, they don't want to eat their vegetables, they don't want to eat their food. I raised my 6 children, and then when I married Michael 28 years ago, and he had 2 and I had 6, we had 8. 2 meals a day, that's all we did. To have 2 meals a day, 8 o'clock, 8:39, and then another one about 2 or 3. Do you know what medicine's showing us today? Nutritionists are saying that time-restricted eating is the best way to eat. What's time-restricted eating? This is eating twice, 6 hours apart in 24 hours. Wow. I first learnt about this when I read The Ministry of Healing. Now, The Ministry of Healing, when was that written? Late 1800s? 1900s. Where am I? 1901, okay, way back then, late 1800s, early 1900s. And Ellen White says, 2 meals is better than 3, but if you do have 3 meals, make the third one light. So so this is not new. And what about the old saying, we should eat breakfast like a king, lunch like a queen, and supper like a pauper? But you know what diabetics have been told for the last 40 years? You've got to eat every 2 hours. Is that right? Well, notice that the princes, the authorities in the field, they don't say, sorry, we made a mistake. You know what they say? New research reveals. This isn't new research. This has been around for hundreds of years. Time-restricted eating. Basically, eating 6 hours apart, eating twice. Again, you've got to do what works for you. It worked for me because I homeschool my children. And the kids loved it because we didn't eat our main meal until 2. Do you know what that meant? All school was done by lunch. Kids loved it. Then you got all afternoon. Mum loved it too. But if your children go to school, if you 9 to 5 job, it's not that easy. You got to work out what works for you. But the stomach loves that rest between meals, and the stomach loves it when it can sleep at night because it hasn't got this big meal in its stomach. Coming through here is the pyloric sphincter. When we wake up in the morning, the pyloric sphincter is open. That's why the best time to drink water is as soon as you wake up. We should all go to bed with water next to our bed. So as soon as we wake up, it's the first thing, is water. Because the pyloric sphincter is open, it goes straight through. There's no acid in your stomach in the morning. It only comes when your brain sees, thinks, smells, tastes food. Then it is released. So we come through the pyloric sphincter into the duodenum. The duodenum is a very busy place because there's a lot happening in the duodenum. The duodenum is the first part of the small intestine, and the duodenum is an alkaline environment. We better put what stomach does first. Stomach releases the pepsin, and the pepsin is what breaks down protein. So now we come down into the duodenum through the pyloric sphincter. And as you can see, we've got the liver, and underneath the liver is the gallbladder. The gallbladder is a reservoir for bile. It is the liver that makes the bile. So let's look at the liver. The liver makes the bile, and bile is the enzyme that emulsifies down into fine particles the unsaturated fat. Remember, the saturated fat was broken down or started in the mouth. But all the other fats, all the other polyunsaturates, monounsaturates, they're all broken down by bile in the duodenum under the action of liver. Now, some people have told me that they've had their gallbladder amputated. I'm so sorry to hear that. I don't want my body parts taken out. But if you have had the gallbladder taken out, the good news is your liver is what makes bile, and you still have a bile duct, so you are still able to break down the unsaturated fats. We've also got the pancreas, just a little organ to the back and to the left of the stomach. And the pancreas does quite a bit. And the pancreas releases sodium bicarbonate. Why does it release sodium bicarbonate? It releases sodium bicarbonate to ensure that this area is alkaline, because sodium bicarbonate is the most alkaline substance. The pancreas also releases pancreatic lipase. Now, we looked in the mouth at lingual lipase. Lipase is a fat-breaking enzyme. Lingual lipase breaks down the saturated fat. Bile emulsifies the unsaturated fat, and the pancreatic lipase further breaks it down so it can be absorbed out of the gut and into the blood. The pancreas also releases pancreatic amylase. In the mouth, we saw salivary amylase, which is ptyalin. Salivary amylase ptyalin started the starch digestion. And remember, it came into the stomach, it's an acid environment, so after 15 minutes it's put on hold. But then the starch travels down into the duodenum, back into an alkaline environment, and pancreatic amylase revives starch digestion so that it can finalize it. Protein digestion began in the stomach, and the pancreas releases the trypsin brothers. What do I mean by trypsin brothers? Well, it's chymotrypsin and trypsin, so we'll just call them the trypsin brothers. The trypsin brothers finalize protein digestion. Now, I've got some good news now. It's not going to get any more difficult. Basically, that's the digestion of our foods. And as I showed you, when we're way back in the mouth, those 5 decisions we make affect the whole of the gastrointestinal tract. The enzymes that break down protein are called proteolytic enzymes. And proteolytic enzymes are pepsin. Pepsin's a proteolytic enzyme. And the other proteolytic enzyme is the trypsin brothers. They're the ones that break down protein. Now, protein is very important because 50% of the membrane around every cell is protein. It's the building blocks of our body as we make new cells. You cannot function without protein. You cannot heal without protein. So important that our protein get broken down. But God, in his wisdom and mercy, has put proteolytic enzymes in certain foods. One is in the core of the pineapple, there's bromelain. In fact, whenever I see people throwing the core away, I go, hey, not the core, please. So how do you do it? It's pretty hard to eat the whole core of the pineapple, isn't it? It's tough. So what you do is you cut your pineapple like this, and you cut little wedges like that, so that every little piece of pineapple just gets a little bit of the core. Then it's a lot easier to eat. But something else I only discovered last year, that the skin of the pineapple, now I'm not suggesting you eat the skin. What a relief. But what you can do when you peel your pineapple, you can put the skin in a saucepan covered with water and give it a gentle simmer for about 15 minutes with the lid on, turn it off, let it cool, strain it, and then that can be drunk just before the meal. And you will be getting some bromelain to help you break down your protein. And it tastes quite nice because when you peel a pineapple, it's inevitable that you get some of the flesh. Am I right? Yeah, it's because you want those little bits out. Also, we call it pawpaw, but I think you call it the papaya, yeah? It contains papain, and papain is also a proteolytic enzyme. Now, we don't advocate or use black pepper. Black pepper is irritating to the lining of the gut. So if you have a black pepper container at home with black pepper in it, my suggestion is you tip it into the rubbish bin, buy a pawpaw, a papaya, scoop out the seeds, wash them, dry them, and put them in your pepper grinder. They look just like peppercorns, and you grind them, and they're hot. They have a bite to them. And your visitors might say, "Dear, your pepper tastes a little bit different to mine," and smile sweetly. It's your digestive aid. So they're two easy ways that you can boost your protein digestion by including foods that contain papain and bromelain. So let me give you a story to illustrate what's happening with many today. Here is protein. Now, when protein gets into the stomach, the pepsin breaks the protein down to peptides and polypeptides. And then peptides and polypeptides come into the duodenum, and the trypsin brothers break the peptide down to amino acid and the polypeptide down to a peptide and amino acid and then amino acid. And remember I said it's only as singular structures that it can be absorbed out of the gut and into the blood. But let me tell you what's happening with some people today. They're drinking with their meals, they're eating all day long, they're eating their largest meal at the end of the day, they're stressed out. And so some protein is getting down into the duodenum. It's not being broken down in the stomach because hydrochloric acid is so low. And maybe their food is just fermenting and coming up, and so the doctor gives them antacids. Wow, how's their protein ever going to be broken down? And so this protein gets down into the duodenum, and the pancreas says, "What are you doing here?" And the protein says, "Well, they're drinking with their meals, they're eating all day long, they're eating their largest meal at the end of the day, and they're stressed out." And so the trypsin brothers say, "We'll do the best we can," but all they can do is break the protein down to peptide and polypeptide. And that can't be absorbed out of the gut and into the blood. Only amino acids can. And our food should all be absorbed halfway down the small intestine. And so what's happening is peptide and polypeptide are getting into the large colon. And the colon says, what are you doing here? And the peptide and the polypeptide says, well, they're eating all day long, they're drinking with their meals, they're eating their largest meal at the end of the day, they're stressed, and the Trypsin brothers did the best they could. And so the colon says, all right, well, we're going to have to create a lot of excess bacteria to try and calm it down, and that creates methane gas. Has everyone heard of methane gas? Comes out the other end as gas. Do you remember I said that what happens in the mouth affects all the way down the gastrointestinal tract? Another reason why we should chew very slowly, eat in peace, drink between our meals. But we now come to the grand finale of digestion, where the nutrients are actually absorbed out of the gut and into the blood. Lining the small intestine are villi. And up the middle of the villi is a lacteal. That's part of the lymphatic system. But on the villi are microvilli. And I'm not going to draw the whole lot, but you can imagine. And as one writer said, the surface area is so great, it makes up about 3 miles in our small intestine for absorption to take place. All through these villi are blood capillary networks. They've got a little bit going up there. And remember, anything that goes into our gastrointestinal tract can't get out unless certain processes are in place. And lining the gastrointestinal tract is a thick turf wall made up of Lactobacillus acidophilus. I'll get it there. Just as well I do my push-ups. My arms are strong. So this is the thick turf wall that coats our small intestine. And it is this microbiome, as it's often called, friendly or healthy bacteria. It's responsible for the final breakdown of our food. But aren't these enzymes breaking our food down? As we saw, they are. But these microbiome, they're releasing something else. They are responsible for the release of our B vitamins. And our B vitamins are our brain vitamins. Our brain doesn't function well unless it's got B vitamins. This microbiome is also responsible for the release of glutathione. Glutathione is hailed as the most potent antioxidant we have. Does that mean we have to supplement with it? No. We just need to make sure we've got good microbiome, and I'm going to show you how we can ensure that. But also, these microbiome are responsible for the release of melatonin. And melatonin is called the fix and rejuvenate nighttime hormone. It's active between the hours of 10 p.m. and 3 a.m. This microbiome is responsible for the absorption of our nutrients out of the gut and into the blood. This microbiome is responsible for the nourishment of the cells that line the gastrointestinal tract. This microbiome is also responsible for protecting. And we looked at this yesterday when we looked at our immune system. How important is that microbiome? Hippocrates, 400 years BC, he said all disease begins in the gut, and he didn't know what I've told you here. As the psalmist that said, I will praise thee, for I am fearfully and wonderfully made, marvellous are thy works, and that my soul knoweth right well. And that psalmist didn't know what I've shown you here. And don't we even have more reason to say, I will praise thee, for what an incredible body we live in. Now, I've said this a few times, and I'm sorry, but I'm going to continue to say it. Everything we need, we've got. And last night I showed you how our microbiome establishes 70% of our immune system. So what would break that down? I'm sure if anybody attending these classes was on statin drugs, hopefully they've gone in the bin. We'll check the bins. Hopefully they're full of statin drugs. Because not only are those statin drugs useless, because as I showed you, cholesterol does not cause heart disease, and people with high cholesterol levels don't get Alzheimer's. Did you catch that one? The Framingham Heart Study showed that. The Framingham Heart Study was established to prove that cholesterol causes heart disease. It's 40 years later and it still hasn't done that. But what it did show is people with high cholesterol levels don't get Alzheimer's. The statin drugs also cause a breakdown of our microbiome. Antibiotics cause a breakdown of our microbiome. I'm not against antibiotics, but they should be kept as life-saving, last resort. Because our body's been designed to heal and we just need to access that. Long-term painkiller use. And when we looked at pain this morning, I showed various ways that we can cope with pain without resorting to the medication. So what's happening now? We've now compromised the breakdown and the release of these important nutrients. We've compromised the absorption. We've compromised nourishing these cells. We've actually lost some of our protection. So how can we build up that microbiome? We can build it up by eating cultured foods, sauerkraut, yogurts, kefirs, gum cheese. All of these foods are foods that originally were done to preserve food through months when the cabbage isn't available, others aren't available. If it's allowed to go too long, it ferments and produces alcohol, then you throw it out. But you can smell it. We've just come from Germany. Oh, we ate some beautiful sauerkraut in Germany. They know how to make sauerkraut. These cultured foods help to replace any lost or maintain the microbiome. But something else, prebiotics. You've heard of prebiotics? First of all, let me show you probiotics. Probiotics are foods that contain Lactobacillus acidophilus bifidobacterium. They're your cultured foods. Prebiotics, what are they? Prebiotics feed the probiotics. What feeds probiotics? Fibre. Fibre. You can have 10 apples, and every apple feeds a different microorganism. Isn't that incredible? In fact, in the garden there are several different types of tomatoes. There are little red ones, there are big red ones, there are little tiny pear-shaped yellow ones, there are big yellow ones. Every different type of tomato feeds a different microorganism in the gut. And we should be eating at least 7 different fibres every meal. The more fibre in your meal, the more microorganisms you're going to feed in your gastrointestinal tract. So please, more fibre, more variety of fibre. So when I was in Andalusia, the northern part of southern Spain, I was at a homeschool camp, so lots of kids. So I talked about different microorganisms. Count your fibres, kids. So the next morning I said, okay, kids, how much fibre do you have? And one little boy said, 20. I said, 20? And I looked at his father, and his father went... He had a blueberry and a raspberry and a blackberry and an almond and a... Maybe 20 is a little bit over the top. But we should be having more fibre. When people are eating cereal and toast for breakfast, sandwiches for lunch, pasta for tea, do you know they're having one fibre? It's called wheat. One. We need a variety. We need a variety of fibre. Isn't God good? The further you look into nutrition, I find, the more remarkable it is. Everything we need, we have. We just need to know how to boost it. If a person has been on the statin drugs or long-term painkiller or antibiotic, they will need to take a probiotic supplement. You can get it in a powder form, and you can take it 3/4 of an hour before breakfast for at least 2 months. That's how long it takes to rebuild that gut flora. All we have left now, or all we should have left, is insoluble fibre. And insoluble fibre is very important because insoluble fibre plays a big role in feeding our microorganisms. Insoluble fibre also sweeps all of these little corners of our gastrointestinal tract. And insoluble fibre stimulates peristalsis because everything that comes out of here should just be insoluble fibre. Ideally, all our nutrients have been absorbed. And there's a little valve called the ileocecal valve, and the ileocecal valve is a one-way valve. We don't want anything to go back. And what's coming out of here is mostly liquid. One of the main functions of the colon is to take water out so stools are formed. But look at this little organ down here. It's called the appendix. God never makes mistakes. And the appendix is not a mistake. One guest told me that she had a cyst on her right ovary. So your appendix is right near your right hip. That's your hip. And she said when she woke up from the operation, the doctor said, "Oh, I took your ovary out because it had a cyst on it." And he said, "No, while I was there, I took your appendix." No. That's why it's all possible. At all possible. Do everything possible so you don't have to have that surgery. If only she'd known that if she'd applied castor oil compresses, that could have broken down that cyst. And if she were to take the wild yam cream to balance the hormones, because the growths only happen on the reproductive organs because of a hormonal imbalance. The only hope of better things is the education of people in right principles. Many people are sick through ignorance, as I think you'll agree. So the appendix, what's its role? It has two main roles. One is it's called the colon's oil can because it lubricates the contents of the colon as it passes through. But it also releases antibacterial fluid. Why would it need to release antibacterial fluid? Because what's coming out here is toxic. Well, why would it be toxic? Our gastrointestinal tract is 10 yards long. And if a person is on a high meat diet, eating a lot of refined sugar, when meat breaks down, it putrefies. When vegetables break down, they ferment. The putrefaction process or effect of that is far more toxic than fermentation. So if a person is on a high meat diet, having a lot of sugar, alcohol, what's coming out of here is pretty toxic. And so the appendix has to work very, very hard to release antibacterial fluid, and sometimes it overworks and can get inflamed. So coming through here, the main function is to take water out so stools are formed. So a few rules of the colon is we should promptly answer nature's immediate call. If you don't, you should panic. Because when the body says go, you got to go. Because if you don't go when the body says go, and why do we feel to go? Because this area fills up. And if you don't go, now we're so glad that this little muscle here in the red, it's called puborectalis. We're so glad it's there because if you're in a traffic jam, you can't go. And if the plane's about to land, you can't go. So we're very thankful to the great God of heaven for giving us puborectalis, that little muscle that can hold that back. But many people use it because they're washing the car and they feel to go, but they want to finish washing the car. Or they're writing an email and they don't want to go till they finish writing the email, or on the phone to the friend and they don't want to go until they finish the conversation, etc., 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 etc. If the body says go, you must go. It's part of this very important, what will we call it? A skill. Listen. You must listen to your body. If the body says go, you must go. Because if you don't, you finish washing the car, then you go and sit, and it doesn't come. Why not? Because it can't stay there. Or this anal muscle gets very weak, and we don't want that. So it goes back into the last part of the colon, and yet the water still is being taken out, and so this goes to rabbit pellets and cement. And it's called constipation. Dr. Kellogg, very famous doctor, who wrote many books on the human body, on health, he said 3 intakes of food a day should equal 3 evacuations a day. If someone has 3 meals a day and goes once, he says that's constipation. So what can you do if the person is only going once a week or once every 2 days, something like that? And if you notice that the colon has a mind of its own, if you tell it to go, it won't. And if you're going too much and you tell it to stop, it won't. It needs gentle stimulation. What gently stimulates it? Drinking adequate water. Eating a diet that has got generous amounts of fibre. That's all your fruits and vegetables and whole grains and legumes, etc., etc. And thank you to the cooks who are giving us illustrations of that. But also exercise. And the best exercises for the colon, here we're back to the core strengthening exercises. When you do core strengthening exercises, it massages the colon. Fibre is important, exercise is important. Sounds like those laws of health. Keeping well hydrated is important. Relaxation is important. Position is important. What do I mean by position? Here is the throne, and here is the person sitting on the throne doing their daily evacuation. And when a person sits on the throne doing their daily evacuation, pubo rectalis remains taut. Things still get through, but if the person is sitting on the throne and in front of the throne they put a little stool so that they are now mimicking the squatting position, pubo rectalis relaxes. And when pubo rectalis relaxes, the colon inside opens up and the contents pass with the greatest of ease. That's why this person's a very happy person and this person is not. And what also happens in the squatting position, it takes all pressure off the anus. And so it's a great way to prevent hemorrhoids and also to heal from hemorrhoids. And if this person can't go and they decided to move things along a bit and they strain, all pressure goes on the anus, and that's when hemorrhoids can happen. Now you can go to Bed Bath Beyond and you can buy Squatty Potty, and it is a stool that wraps around the base of the throne, making it very easy. When I went to Africa, when I went to India, when I went to Singapore, in many places they still have a toilet that's a hole in the ground. So you squat to go. It's all tile, it's all flush, it's all clean. And science now shows that it is the best way to go because it relaxes pubo rectalis, takes pressure off the anus, and so the person can go with the greatest of ease. But what if the person's doing all that and they're still only going every second day? So they can take herbs. And the herbs that we use, it's called colon tea. And if you go to officialbarbarao'Neill.com, officialbarbarao'Neill.com is my website. It'll take you to Jacqueline, my PA's shop, and they sell colon tea. And colon tea is a mixture of certain herbs. We give it to our guests at Misty Mountain, and it gently stimulates peristalsis. Some people need half a cup a day, some people need 1 cup a day, some people need 2 cups a day. Very occasionally, people need 3 cups a day. We had a psychologist attend our program. She was in her 60s. She said, I go once a week with help. And the help she gives it is an irritating substance. I said, we'll get you moving. Castor oil compresses to the abdomen. She needed 3 cups a day. Cup in the morning, cup in the middle of the day, cup in the evening. And we also, at our retreat, had a colonic irrigation treatment. And she had a couple of those in the week. Within 2 days, she's going 2-3 times a day. Halfway through the week, the whites of her eyes went white. Her grey complexion became pink. At the end of the week, she said, I can't believe how clear my mind is. She said, maybe this is the problem with most of my patients. Got that? This is not working. There's a big connection between the gut and the mind. There are many books written on it. In fact, I've got a book at home called The Second Brain. It's all about the colon. She got back to me 5 months later. She said, when I went home, she said, I implemented the lifestyle. I stopped meat. I started eating a plant-based diet. I started exercising. I'd stopped my coffee, my red wine, and I was taking 3 cups a day. She said, after 6 weeks, I started going 4 times a day. So I brought it back to 2 cups a day. And that got me going twice a day. She said, after 6 weeks, I started going 4 times a day, so I brought it back to 1 cup a day. What was she doing? She was listening. She was listening and adjusting accordingly. No man can tell you what it will take. Only your body will. So please listen to it. She said within 5 months, she's going twice a day and she's not taking the tea at all. Remember Psalm 104, verse 14? God gave herbs for the service of man. They work with the body. What an amazing body we live in. And thank God for the simple natural treatments that help things along. But what if it's the other side? What if it's irritable bowel? What if it's Crohn's disease? What if it's colitis? Crohn's disease, it's called an autoimmune disease. I have to tell you right now, I do not believe in autoimmune diseases. And if you've been told you've got an autoimmune disease, please immediately reject that. Because it defies Newton's third law of motion that states that to every action there's an equal and an opposite reaction. There's always a reason. Now, I do not question that the symptoms are there, but remember, the princes don't always get it right. Put not your trust in princes. Start giving your body the right conditions. We've seen people totally heal from rheumatoid arthritis. And what if they've been told it's an autoimmune disease? Do you know God didn't design the body to eat itself? Did he? No, reject this one. We've seen people totally heal from thyroid problems and they've been told they've got autoimmune disease. We've seen people totally heal from Crohn's disease. Did you hear that? And they've been told it's an autoimmune disease. That's why I don't believe in autoimmune diseases. The body has been designed to heal itself, and it will. And sometimes it needs a little bit of time. Remember, you look at your history, you listen to your symptoms, you try different things, and you observe and adjust accordingly. Slippery elm is the powdered bark of the slippery elm tree. And slippery elm coats, soothes and heals the lining of the gut. So we had a young man who'd had Crohn's disease for 10 years. He was 30, going 10 times a day. And he's on steroids, 20 milligrams a day, and he's on anti-inflammatories. Is it working? First 2 days at Misty Mountain, it's just juices. Gives the gut a lovely rest. And because he was going 10 times a day, we gave him slippery elm every 2 hours. When you mix it with hot water, it goes like a soft jelly, coats, soothes the lining of the gut. Within 24 hours, no more bleeding from the bowel. Within 24 hours, no cramping. Within 48 hours, stools are forming. He was so excited about this, he just walked around with the jar. He said, this is my saviour. I love this herb. 10 years he's been suffering, 10 years. By Wednesday, because the bleeding had stopped and because the cramping had stopped, I said to him, I can't tell you what to do with your medication, but the fact that you're not bleeding, you're not cramping, tells me your colon is not as inflamed. So if I was you, I'd stop the anti-inflammatory medication. He said, I will. He said, because in 2 days I've had more response than in the last 10 years. What a wonderful God we serve, who's interested in our health. He stopped it. He didn't have a major reaction. What would we have done if he'd gone back to 10 times a day diarrhea? We got a choice. You can go back on the anti-inflammatories, or you can just go back on slippery elm every 2 hours. You see, when everything slowed down, we slowed back on the slippery elm. Stopped every 2 hours, went to 4 times a day. See what you're doing? You're listening and you adjust. You adjust by listening to the body. What works? By the end of the week, this was a very happy man. He was off half of his medication. He was only having the slippery elm 3 times a day. But at our retreat, there are certain foods we do not serve. We do not serve dairy. It's a common allergen. We do not serve wheat. Wheat was hybridized in the 1950s, and the hybridization of the wheat created a protein structure that's very difficult for the gut to break down. And in a compromised gut, it can be like, it can just cause irritation even more. We don't serve oats because oats are high in a plant chemical called lectins. And when the gut is inflamed, the lectins can get into the blood and increase the inflammation. My sons, they have oats every morning for breakfast. They love them. They sit well with them. But we find at our retreat, because we get a lot of people with compromised health, the oats don't sit well. In about 30% of people, they don't sit well. How do you know if they sit well with you? Who'll tell you? Your body. If you're not sure, stop them for a month, then start them again. Your body will quickly tell you. Peanuts are commonly contaminated with mold. They're commonly contaminated with a mold waste called mycotoxin. Myco means fungus, toxin is a poison. I know in Australia, every school, peanuts are banned because children have had anaphylactic shocks. It's not actually the peanut, it's the mold waste on the peanut. If you grow peanuts, harvest them straight away, wash them well, boil them or dry roast them, they'll probably be fine. But in Australia, 75% of Australians live in the city. So all their food's grown in the country. And then it's in storage. You get a cold, frosty morning, a hot, sunny day. What growth do you start to get in those silos? You get mould growth. And refined sugar is just like kerosene to a fire. So we advise anyone with Crohn's disease, colitis, ulcerative colitis, gastritis, stop these foods. Take the slippery elm as much as your body needs it, and we've seen people totally heal from all those diseases. So when this young man went home, he was very happy, went home with a good supply of slippery elm. No man could induce him to eat these foods. 10 years he had suffered. He said, what will I do with the steroids? I said, you're on 20 milligrams. If everything's still good and working well in 2 weeks, I'd go down to 15 milligrams of cortisone. Everything's going well. In another month, I'd go down to 10. In another month, I'd go down to 5. And in another month, you should be able to stop it. And he was told he'd never be off it. What we see is people healing. All the drugs do is they mask. And I have to tell you, his drugs weren't even masking these very well. See, the cells that line our gastrointestinal tract are remade every 3 to 5 days. Knowing that, once you give that gut the right condition, you can get responses very quickly. And so ends our journey through the gastrointestinal tract. I trust you've enjoyed the journey. I trust your eyes have been opened in many ways in the journey. And Proverbs 14 verse 6 says, knowledge is easy to him that understands. My aim was to give you an understanding of your gastrointestinal tract so you now have the knowledge on how to treat it. And that's why God says, I beseech you therefore, brethren, in Romans 12, 1 and 2, by the mercies of God, that you present your bodies living sacrifice. Don't present your bodies when you've got it all working well. Present it to God now. Because remember, he is the healer. And we see that in Exodus 15:26. If you will diligently hearken to the voice of the Lord thy God and do that which is right in his sight. Tonight you've learned how to do what is right in his sight. Give ear to his commandment. Keep all his statutes. He said, I'll put none of these diseases upon thee that I brought upon the Egyptians, for I am the Lord that healeth thee. He is the healer. And he blesses the natural treatments. And God's healing methods are the methods that work with the healing powers of the body. Let us close in prayer. Father, thank you so much for our gastrointestinal tract. Thank you so much for the herbs. Thank you so much for the knowledge. Thank you in the name of Jesus. Amen. Thank you.